Thank you, Nancy. I need somebody to be in charge of the thunder. Judy, I don't know if I might have to separate when I give you the cue. Reading from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14. Immediately, I know, it starts out, immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against him. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and started walking on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Thus ends the reading of the word.
Thanks be to God.
Now, I need to set the scene. I always love to set the scene. You remember last week we did the feeding of the 5,000, okay? And what happened was Jesus got into a boat himself, left the disciples behind with the crowds, and wanted to get to a deserted place away on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. So he got to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, but what happened? Does anybody remember what happened? The crowds followed him, not in boats, on foot, around the Sea of Galilee, and they followed him to that deserted place. And when he got to the deserted place, the crowds were there waiting for him. And he had compassion on them. And remember, why was it he wanted to get to a place away last week? Remember? He wanted to get to that deserted place away because John the Baptist had been killed. And he was grieving the loss of John the Baptist, his friend and his relative, his co-worker, his friend. But he did not have a quiet place to be because the crowds were there, even in that deserted place, and he had compassion on them, and he healed them, and he ended up doing what? He ended up feeding them. He ended up feeding 5,000 men. Matthew throws in the statistics. 5,000 men plus women and children. So there are those who say it was how many people? 20,000. Good. You guys were on it last week. So here we are at the end of that story. The very last line of that story is, and he fed 5,000 men plus women and children. And the very next word is immediately. Immediately, Jesus told his disciples, "Okay, fellas, we're done here. They've collected the 12 baskets of leftovers. We're done here. Everybody's fed. Okay, guys, get into the boat and go to the other side of the lake." What's that about? Leave me here. I'll take care of the crowd. So, by himself, all alone, Jesus manages to dismiss the 20,000 people. See you later. Adios. Goodbye. Go. Bye. And then he is able says Matthew, to ascend the nearby mountain and be by himself, alone, able to be in that place of quiet and peace, to be in prayer and communion with God. In the meantime, the disciples are in the boat. And the disciples have been, according to the story, all day on the lake. The Sea of Galilee is 8 miles wide and 13 miles long. And they are stuck. Anybody know what, there's a lot of terminology for people who sail, but when the winds are so strong that you can't possibly tack or work against them if you're a sailor, or you can't row against them, they didn't have motors, when there were horsepower in that boat. Trying to get from one side of the lake to the other with the wind against them, they are not moving. They are stuck in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and their boat is being battered. Matthew uses that word, battered, by the waves. Imagine the terror. I would imagine everybody who can is trying to bail. Bail out the boat, get rid of the water. I'm sure the water from the waves is pouring over the gunwales of the boat. And there are some who are assigned to bailing, others assigned to being over in the corner, being quiet and praying, and others assigned to rowing. They are terrified. Can you possibly tell me what's going on in their heads? It's okay. Whatever comes to mind. Where the heck? What are they saying to themselves? Where the heck is Jesus? How could he do this to us? How could he send us out in the middle of this lake? Where is he? Why did he desert us? Why did he abandon us? Why did he leave us to our own devices and stay back there by himself? Where is he when we need him? And Jesus has been praying all day on the mountainside Matthew tells us, into the evening, into the quiet of the evening. Yesterday, remember, he got onto the other side of the shore. It was evening, and there were lots of people waiting for him, and he fed a whole bunch of people, and they stayed probably through the night. Now he's been able to get up on the mountain. He's been there all day praying. It's now evening again. The disciples are on the water, in the ship, storm-tossed. Can I have a little sound effects here? Storm-tossed, okay? They are frustrated, and they are afraid. And what else are they? They're hungry, they're thirsty, they're exhausted, and they're feeling very much alone. Sound effects, keep the sound effects going. I need some people to help me with wind. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Lots of wind, lots of wind, lots of wind, and lots of noise and lots of chaos. And the disciples suddenly, through the nightness of the watch of the night, there are 4 watches of the night. The first one starts at 6, and the 4th watch, 3 o'clock in the morning. Those who are awake, who are watching in the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, suddenly look out over the water, which may by now have calmed a bit, and they see this apparition walking toward them on the water. And they are startled, and they are still hungry. Their blood sugars are probably low, and they're still thirsty, and they are terrified at what they see. And their immediate reaction, their immediate response is, oh my goodness, it's a ghost. It's a ghost. It has no identity, it's just a ghost, an apparition walking to them on the water. And Jesus says, wait. do not be afraid. It's me. I'm here. Peter, in his own inimitable way, says, Lord, if it's you, bid me come to you. Lord, if it is you, bid me come to you. Now that if it is you is what? It's a challenge. Okay? We got to find out if this is real. We got to find out if this is Jesus. We got to get some proof. Now, there are two ways to figure this out. If Peter says, if the word comes, if the answer comes, sure, come on ahead. Then either he steps over the gunnel into the water and sinks immediately, which is proof that it's an apparition. Or if he's walking on the water, then he is witness to a miracle. Very good. You're filling in the blanks beautifully. So here's Peter, and Jesus, the apparition, the one on the water, in response to Peter's challenge, simply says, I would have said, okay, you asked for it, but he doesn't say that. He just says, come. Peter steps out of the boat and is walking on the water to Jesus. Now, what is profound to me about this story, and Matthew is the only one who tells this story about Peter. He's the only one who includes this story about Peter in this walking on the water tale. And here is Peter, who is suddenly distracted. His eyes are on Jesus. His face is looking toward Jesus. He is walking toward Jesus, and suddenly the wind, whoosh, whoosh, suddenly you aren't a very strong wind. He is suddenly frightened by a very strong wind that threatens him, that distracts him, that will bowl him over. His eyes are no longer on Jesus. And he suddenly begins to sink in the distraction and in the doubt of the moment. And he cries out. In that moment, he cries out, Lord, save me. What has he done? What has he done in this moment? He's been witness to a miracle, and he is what? He is convinced that the one who is before him is Jesus, is Lord. And he says, Lord, save me. And what's so interesting to me about this story is that in an instant, in a moment, Jesus' arm reaches out and catches up. And what does that tell you? Does it tell you that they were this close? Does it tell you that Peter was practically there? Does it tell you that Peter was almost face to face with Jesus when he let the wind distract him, when he let the wind frighten him, when he let the wind sink him in doubt? And in that moment, in this wonderful word that is catch him up, the Greek word was, and Jesus reached out and caught him up, and the word is translated rescue. It's rescued him from peril, caught him up, and I love the fact that it's like catching fish, like catching. Caught him up and rescued him from his peril. And in that moment, I am picturing the two headed toward the boat. Nobody ever finishes this story, but the two of them are headed to the boat. They're both walking together to the boat. They're both walking together on the water to the boat. And they climb into the boat and say, hey everyone, we're here. We're back. And the response of the disciples is, oh my God, truly, this is the Son of God. Truly, we have seen in this moment the proof that this is the Son of God. this is an occasion of change. This was an experience for Peter that was an experience like none other that he has had, and he has changed forever from this experience. He is a totally different person from this experience with Jesus. I dare to say that Peter, who is a disciple of Jesus, has been a disciple of Jesus, has been a follower of Jesus, has not understood faith until this moment in time. I dare to say that Peter was a loyal follower. I dare to say that Peter was a loyal learner. That Peter was in the company of Jesus, was present with Jesus. But I dare to say that Peter did not understand faith. Peter did not have a living, active faith. He had a loyalty. Now, you may say, well, what are you getting at? What are you talking about? Some of the commentators that I read for today are very clear to say we need to understand that faith isn't a thing. It isn't a thing we possess. Faith is something we do. Faith is something we live. Faith is something we exercise. And if we don't exercise it like a muscle we don't use, it atrophies and withers away. And Peter really has never used faith. Peter has never really experienced faith until today. Until he was knocked off his feet by a frightening wind and had to cry out, "Lord, save me!" In that moment, he made active his faith. The ship is a metaphor for the church. The ship, the boat on the water, is a metaphor for Matthew's church, which is being battered by prejudice and persecution. And Matthew is telling this story to help his community of faith understand that you must have active faith. You cannot doubt. You cannot let the strong winds throw you off course. You cannot let them batter you. You cannot let them destroy you. You must stay in the believing mode. In our church today, in this church, in the big C, United Methodist Church, I have to tell you that I participate in district level committees. I have participated in the annual conference. And I have this feeling that we have the words. We have great words. We have discerning. We love to use that word. Methodists love to discern. And we love to do prayerful considering. But there's something in what's going on that says our faith is in a shaky state. Our faith is in trouble. I go to these meetings and we're talking about this money and that money and who can pay these bills and who's going to pay off this loan. And I hear all sorts of stuff that says we have to do this and we have to rearrange this and we have to restructure this so that we can survive. But we are not talking about faith. We are not living in faith. We are not being people of faith. We are being people of worry and fear. And we are being thrown off by this worry about what tomorrow may bring. We are worried about what the future holds for us. We are not believing that Jesus Christ has a purpose for us and is trying to lead us in a direction. My prayer and my hope is that this story today will help us understand that believing is a verb and that we have to actively participate in doing that every single solitary day. We cannot get stuck in worry. We cannot get stuck in what will tomorrow bring. We cannot get stuck in if I step out, am I going to sink or am I going to stand? One commentator said, faith is like a song that disappears when you stop singing. I want to leave you with this image. Let faith be that tune that you can just never get out of your head. Let it play and play and play and sing to you every minute of the day, and we will know what we are called